from Force13 HQ and from our contributors from around the world. This is June the 3rd, 2018. Hello and welcome to another tropical weather bulletin for June the 3rd. The third day of the Atlantic hurricane season begins, but none of the action's there today. We have one cyclone active, tentatively called one. It's that tropical depression in the Western Pacific, the South China Sea, and two invests which are also there too, although I do expect we'll see another invest be popping up shortly, and if you saw yesterday's update you might be able to speculate which one that is. Well, let's take a look at the overviews right now. First, the East Pacific, which is where this area of interest is, now with a 70% chance in the next 5 days. In the next 2 days, I believe it's only at 10%, but those chances will rise massively over the course of the next few days. I think this is pretty much a certainty to develop. Let's take a look at the Western Pacific. This is what we have right now. Tropical Depression 5W and the two invests. The expected peak of 5W is in around 3 days' time of 40 miles per hour, according to the JCWC's map. Those bars there correspond to 1 day in the track forecast there, so that's where we expect it to go in the next 5 days or so, although that could change because you may find it interesting to see what the models say a little bit later on. 90W chances are down, not likely to develop. 91W chances also down a little bit, still could develop in the near term and probably be a weak tropical cyclone, but the model, the GFS at least, has significantly backed off both of them, although you may possibly see some mid-latitude development out of one of these storms, or maybe both of them conjoined in some sort of strange way. The only time will tell on that one. Nothing else that's interesting anywhere else around the world at this time, so let's move on. Satellite pictures, we can take a look on all of these areas. Here's the East Pacific. You can't see the area where that storm might develop later, at least not on this imagery. But you can see the rest of the ocean is looking pretty quiet. The Atlantic looks like this. Latest GOES imagery, it's just getting dark, and you can see significant amounts of tropical disturbance activity going on towards the southwest there, over the Central American area and into the East Pacific, and that's what will give birth to what we expect will be the first named storm of the season. The Atlantic's looking fairly quiet, very little going on at all actually. Some thunderstorm activity in northern Florida, mainly the Alberto landfall area, and one or two little things along the east coast there as well, and some significant thunderstorms over the central part of the US visible there, and also over the Yucatan, or indeed the southwestern part of the Yucatan, extending over the Bay of Campeche as well slightly. So interesting, but not for tropical cyclones. The West Pacific then looks like this, and I have to say Tropical Depression 5W does look terrible. The other two invests are visible there as well. 90W not looking so hot either. 91W is that little burst of convection just south of Guam. Guam could get some squally rainfall and maybe some significant wind gusts from this system as well, but not as a tropical cyclone unless something really remarkable happens in the next 24 hours whilst it's passing very close to the island. I'm just going to see what's on this. This is Australia right now. Looking pretty nice actually, but very quiet on the tropical front. And now let's head back. Well, the North Indian as well, if we've got that. That is the latest image. Wasn't expecting that. Looking fairly quiet. You can just about make out 5W on the right hand side of the image there too. We've also got the floaters, which will of course tell us most nicely what's going on. Okay, we don't have 5W, but we have the other two invests there presented on the screen. You can see 90W still got a few flares up of convection. 91W is just that very small ball of convection that's been going up there. Very little going on apart from that. But either of those two systems could still develop, but 90W in particular not looking as good as it did yesterday. Okay, then let's go to the latest sea surface temperatures. I really don't think it's much different to what we saw yesterday. SSTs in the West Pacific, pretty much a blanket area there above 30 degrees for 90W and 5W, which was 99W. For 91, the one that's near Guam, it can get very confusing. A little bit cooler, around 28-29 degrees Celsius. Over in the East Pacific, where that system may form this week, warm temperatures there as well, 30 degrees plus. And we'll take a look at what the model says on that shortly, but if it does move towards the northwest, it will drop off a bit of a cliff at this time of year in those sea surface temperatures. Now let's take a look at what the models are showing us then. This is the Atlantic first of all. We go in order the same time in every bulletin. You can see progression over the course of the next week, the wind map. A few extratropical cyclones moving off the US Atlantic coast and moving out over the North Atlantic, but coming into this week it's looking pretty quiet. You may have just noticed that East Pac system moving out towards the west, and you'll see its result later on, and a significant gale force wind there off the coast of Honduras and Nicaragua as well. Didn't look tropical to me though. So this is the East Pacific right now. Next tropical cyclone way up north there moving through, and you'll see if you look towards the right hand side very shortly, you'll see this system that the National Hurricane Center has at 70%. There it is as a fully fledged tropical storm becoming a hurricane, and something very strange on the GFS model there, two other little systems down there, or maybe even more. That looks exceedingly strange, no idea what's happening there, but a possible landfall in Mexico moving towards the northwest from what we expect will be the first named storm of the season. Here's the Westpac. GFS in the latest model run has completely dropped off pretty much all of the development of all three systems, or at least negates them massively. You can see what's left of 5W moving into Hainan Island there, and then moving into China, I believe. And then eventually towards the end of the run here, one of the invests ends up intensifying in the mid-latitudes, as you're just about to see there, reaching tropical storm intensity if it is still tropical at that point, or indeed if it has a circulation. So who knows what's happening there. And this is the North Indian Ocean, which is again looking pretty quiet at this time. Not too much going on here, but it is getting a little bit more breezy overall across the whole basin throughout the course of the next week. But as far as tropical cyclones are concerned, we're not looking at anything too significant, or anything at all really, over the course of the next week. So let's move back to the image, if we can find it, and take a look at the remaining graphics. The wind shear map, this is for the West Pacific, and I think is still up to date. You see the issue for 5W, it's wind shear, and you may remember yesterday, and I do remember it, that's why I'm bringing it up. Yesterday we saw that wind shear was very low and decreasing, and now it's just completely flip-flop, and now it is high and increasing. So that makes a lot of sense not, although it is still fairly low further north, although it is increasing there as well. So it looks like a complete misjudgment for the wind shear, which has prevented this storm from intensifying, and looks to be preventing it for the foreseeable too. Near the Philippines, lowering amounts of wind shear there, and it's looking marginal for 91W as well, but there could be some decent conditions on the way for at least one of those invests, so who knows if the models have any idea what they're talking about at all. And speaking of which, the HWRF shows this right now for 5W, still calls for tropical storm development, and for a bit of a stalling process later on as it nears Hainan into the Gulf of Tonkin just about, and then probably weakens as it moves over there. You can also see on the right hand side the red tracks are JTWC's official track forecast. They've also got the navgem there, that's pretty much drawing the straightest line, but as we saw, HWRF and GFS pretty much both calling for a stalling motion, so if it doesn't develop significantly as a tropical entity, it could be a significant rainmaker possibly for Hainan Island, and maybe for Vietnam and the mainland China. Here's another look from RAL, which shows some other different models as well, the CTCX and the CMC both opting for a bit further east track, although the CMC does initiate further east. and another model there as well. Not sure if that is a statistical one or not. And then you've got the intensities on the right hand side. HWRF pretty much being the strongest one, but barely getting to 50 knots. The rest of them is pretty much half and half overall on whether it will get tropical storm status or not. Well, we'll wait and see, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen on this evening, morning local time. And RAM's diagnostics at the minute as well, showing that wind shear is around 20 knots, and GFS and HWRF both expect an increase before a slight or moderate decrease later on, which is pretty much when that stalling happens, and that may be the time when we get to see the tropical storm get named, if at all. 2018 to date, we're using the same graphic as yesterday because nothing's changed. Just another view of the Western Pacific there. The forecast we're calling for 29 tropical storms this year in the West Pacific, which is more than any of the last 3 years and over the average by 2. And to follow that forecast, our next storm as an average guide needs to be forming in the next week, and it still looks like that's more likely than not, but much less likely than it looked last night. And on this day, the very interesting research that Force13 did last year comes up on this day. In 1885, a ship reported a pressure of 943 millibars in a cyclone off the coast of Aden in Yemen. That is right in the Gulf of Aden, very close to where Yemen turns to the northwest, the coastline. 943 millibars, that suggests a category 3 storm in that location. If that did happen, we have no other precedent for that, but I think Sagar a few weeks ago did go a little bit further west than this storm would have done. The only June storm ever reported to affect the Mascarene Islands also formed on this day in 1949 near Réunion, moved off towards the west and then towards the southwest. 1968, Abby became a hurricane on approach to western Florida, weakened before arriving. In 1979, Andres became a hurricane near the western coast of Mexico, became a category 2 later on in the day, and on the following day made landfall, I believe, or at least got very close. Alberto became a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, a short-lived one in 1982. And in 1995, Allison was the first storm of the Atlantic hurricane season that year. It formed on this day. Well, that's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin, and now here are your outlets. You can follow Force13's outlets, the website force13.com. You can also find our YouTube page, search Force13, subscribe if you haven't. You can also find our Facebook page under the same name, and we're also on Twitter. It's @Force13 if you'd like to get in touch or follow our page there. We've also now launched on Patreon as well, so if you'd like to send a contribution to make the project even bigger and better, like Alex Zaragoza has done so far, you can find out more on our Patreon page. Any contributions we do receive are invested straight back into the project and its functions. You can also add Force13 on Skype and my personal account, Fool13 at extension 9094 on Discord for tropical weather chat.